Now, the first speaker we have tonight is Kylie Ward. Kylie Ward is an adjunct professor and a renowned leader and passionate CEO who has shaped the Australian College of Nursing to become a prominent and influential professional organisation, as well as a strong and collective voice for the nursing profession to improve patient outcomes and the social determinants of health for all Australians. Kylie is also driven to improve gender equality and diversity, as well as promoting the importance of women in leadership roles, both nationally and internationally. Kylie is going to draw on her extensive professional history and experience to give us insight into the complexity of women and violence in the workplace. Kylie's distinguished career spans almost 3 decades and has seen her hold executive positions in the largest health services in New South Wales and Victoria. Through her commitment to reform, transformational change and leadership development, she has been awarded honorary professorships from Monash University, Deakin University, the University of Technology in Sydney, Western Sydney University and Federation University. I know, right? But you know, it's good to know. Kylie is also the first nurse to be appointed by the Federal Minister as a board director of the Australian Digital Health Agency. She is a board director of the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Advisory Council, as well as serving ministerial appointments to the Aged Services Industry Reform Committee and the Health Translation Advisory Committee of the National Health and Medical Research Council. Dedicating her career and purpose to empowering others, Kylie has received widespread recognition and received multiple awards, including 2017 ACT Telstra Businesswoman of the Year Award for Social Purpose and Enterprise, and in 2018 Western Sydney University prestigious Alumni Award for Professional Excellence. Kylie is an inspiring leader, she is, with a flair for inspiring others and promoting socially responsible and progressive culture. A motivational executive, Kylie has led thousands with her holistic, innovative and transformative approach to leadership. She focuses on building resilience and empowering people to meet organisational challenge, which is a big problem in our world. Righto.
Thank you. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet tonight and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And it is a real honour and privilege to be here. This is very important work, Imogen. The first slide that I wanted to show was actually Hannah Clarke and her 3 children. And it was really important for me to have that slide up because of the work that we're doing tonight, and as Imogen has kindly invited me to be here and pulling together some content. It's only just last week we've got another unnecessary and unforgivable loss. So I'll walk you through the slides. That was the first slide. And I wanted to keep Hannah up there to hold close into our hearts as we have this conversation. There are currently 415,000 registered nurses and midwives in Australia today. Do we have any nurses and midwives in the audience? Special shout out. I think sometimes people don't realise how many nurses and midwives. We're the largest health workforce, and hundreds of thousands as a fleet. Of course, the largest health workforce as well. There are varying perceptions of what constitutes violence, and a vague borderline of acceptable behaviour has actually led to the lack of a uniform definition of violence internationally. Workplace violence is a widespread problem across healthcare and has multifactorial causes that go beyond factors related to the perpetrator and or the victim. Situational, organisational, interactional, structural and societal factors can all trigger and exacerbate incidents of workplace violence. As the majority of the nursing and midwifery workforce are female, discrimination and gender inequality remain significant challenges because we still sit decade after decade around 90% female dominated for nursing. Now, so too are the fact that the issues affecting the profession are staffing patterns, inadequate support, shift work, lack of security in health settings and during home visits, the nature of nursing care, heavy and demanding workloads, and poor work relationships. Types of verbal, and non-physical workplace violence for nursing and midwifery professions include swearing, rudeness, anger, shouting, making unreasonable demands, insulting or questioning professional ability, i.e. challenging people to whether they're incompetent, incapable, or threatening even our registration, sarcasm, name-calling, stepping into the personal space, threatening comments, and I've had this myself, as many would have, to self and to family or property, ridicule in front of others, unjustified criticism, symbolic violence, things like punching and hitting the desk or the glass at the triage, staring, gesturing, sexually inappropriate behaviour, berating, formal complaints without cause, rumour mongering, taunting, taking photographs, and the use of social media. And some of the types of physical violence, and this is from studies that have been done from nurses and midwives, include grabbing, hitting, destructive behaviour again, like punching that safety glass, spitting, kicking, pushing, punching, scratching, grabbing and twisting a body part, throwing or being struck with an object, the use of non-traditional weapons like sharps or IV poles or chairs, biting, inappropriate physical contact, body fluids being thrown like blood or urine or faeces, pulling hair, jewellery and clothing, because you need, remember the role of the nursing, we're often so close, restraining or immobilising staff, inappropriate sexual conduct, damage to personal property, examples being like tyres slashed, choking, strangling, the use of traditional weapons like knives, and formal knives, but I've also been in hospitals where the knife form, the cutlery has been used, and of course sexual assault. Sexual harassment and or assault of nurses is not only physical but non-physical and grossly underreported. The Australian Institute of Criminology ranked healthcare facilities as the most violent workplaces in the country, and that goes as far back as 1999. Research published by the Australian Institute of Criminology found the health industry is the most violent and nurses are the most at-risk occupational group. Research published in 2018 reveals female healthcare workers are more than twice as likely to have experienced physical and or sexual violence from their partner in the past year than any other woman. So the issue of women and violence is very complex for the nursing profession. Violent behaviours can be adopted as a social norm or coping strategies by both victims and observers, and this is inherent in nursing where we've just been taught to put up with it. Many people understand that emergency departments can be dangerous places with unstable or undiagnosed patients, including substance abuse, psychotic episodes, lengthy waiting times, heightened anxiety regarding waiting or loved ones and so on. But the reality is that violence in the workplace for health knows no boundaries, and with increasing cognitive impairment and behavioural issues, violence towards nurses and midwives occurs in all settings, including the acute setting, primary and community health, as well as aged care facilities. The International Labour Organisation considers nurses to be at the high risk of workplace violence as well. And one challenge that we should all consider, because we probably all have babies, is student and novice nurses have an increased risk of becoming victims of workplace violence and bullying and are more vulnerable to these behaviours as they may feel powerless to address them. Workplace issues of violence for nurses also mirror society's broader issues, where many of those who use violence also hold strong, entitled attitudes, supportive of a culture of toxic masculinity. And it is troubling to see men exhibiting these traits being appointed to positions of world leaders. And I think, the Trumps of the world and that are not setting any good examples. Nursing is also plagued by sexy, stereotyped images of our profession, and you only have to put in sexy nurse and so many images come up and scroll down pages and pages, and it's tied into pornography and it's tied into the perception as a worker. And so that's, It's very insipid in then being regarded as an intelligent, scientifically based, behaviourally based professional. And so that feeds in to the behaviours that we experience in the workplace. While some people legally and perhaps even professionally get excused for their diminished condition, the reality is that these patients target the same person and they seem to pick their victims, and they will either verbally, physically or sexually harass and or assault the same person. So while somebody may be confused or impaired, it is not that they harass or grab the male nurses or all nurses, it's the one on the shift that might keep. So you do have to wonder how underlying in the pathology it is, and it's not actually that random is what we're finding more and more. And so one must wonder how deep in some men's psyche or underlying pathology is their right to make a unilateral choice to exert power and control over another person. How deep does this go? I have not yet met a nurse who has never experienced any form of sexual harassment. And it is such an epidemic that the Australian College of Nursing last year, I put out a call for help and got overwhelmed with response, and we launched a national working party to address the sexual harassment and sexual assault of nurses by patients, because there's already things in place from colleagues or for members of the community. So this is specifically for patients, and we're just about to release a position statement with system-wide recommendations. The impacts of violence in our society is very significant for health and healthcare. Evidence shows that women who have experienced physical or sexual intimate partner violence report higher rates of depression, having an abortion and acquiring HIV compared to women who have not. Intimate partner violence is also a leading contributor to illness, disability and premature death for women aged 18 to 44. Some men think that there's no correlation towards their violence as a partner and their role as a father. However, children and young people are affected for their social well-being and mental health, and for many, many years to come into adulthood. Indigenous women are 32 times more likely to be hospitalised due to family violence than non-Indigenous women. 92% of women who identify as LGBTQIA+ have experienced sexual harassment in their lifetime. 9 out of 10 women with a disability have been sexually harassed. Domestic and family violence is the leading cause of homelessness for women and their children. And more recently, with the advancements of technology, 1 in 5 Australians have experienced image-based abuse as we see the uptake of posting porn revenge. Violence against women is estimated to cost the Australian economy $22 billion a year. Every nurse and midwife in their career will likely experience some form of workplace violence. They will also care for many patients, clients and residents who are also experiencing domestic violence. And as previously stated, of course, twice as many women in healthcare are more likely to be in relationships themselves. So nurses and midwives as trained professionals carry so much responsibility, and as the caring profession, how do we actually help those caring for others? And me being the leader of the profession nationally, it's a lot to contemplate on any given day. How do we tackle this? So going to the next slide, if you will. Gayle is an outback nurse. Gayle Woodford was raped and murdered by Dudley Davey, a patient, in 2016. Has anybody heard of Gayle's story? Yeah. Davey was released early after serving a sentence for a previous offence, an indecent assault on a 17-year-old girl in 2012. Gayle was a 56-year-old mother of 2 and a rural and remote nurse. She did not have a second responder with her in the car, and as a dedicated nurse and very used to being on call, drove to the remote yet very violent APY community to answer the call for medical assistance, as we do. As health professionals, it's very hard to decide, no, I won't turn up, and the boundaries around that. And in fact, our professional licence can be challenged if we don't serve. 2 years before, Gayle had also been attacked whilst working, but by a different serial criminal. Senior APY Lands Police had warned the health service management not to allow nurses to work alone after another nurse was attacked in a different community, but that advice was ignored by the management. And of course, this is all disclosed in the inquest. So following an inquest, Gayle's Law has been introduced in South Australia, and we've been fighting for that, and many people, for several years, and after much lobbying, and they're just trying to dilute that. However, the Australian College of Nursing and many others are still fighting for this law, and the crazy thing is that even though we're federated, South Australia's introduced this law, but not other states and territories. And so we're working to get safety for all workers and health professionals. Now, violence doesn't only affect nurses in the workplace, as I have mentioned. Caitlin O'Brien was a 31-year-old Melbourne-based registered nurse who had a passion for photography and arts. Caitlin was passionate about safety for emergency workers and had finished her master's degree and was well on her way in her nursing career. Caitlin was recovering middle of last year, from successful surgery to remove a brain tumour, and had been back at work at the Alfred for 2 weeks when she was killed by her partner. You might remember this in the news middle of last year. And it was interesting when I was researching, and I think how quickly sometimes we forget the memory of people as so many incidents come by. So in June last year, she was found stabbed to death in her Melbourne home. Police conducted a welfare check, then broke the door down after her partner presented at the police station, informing the police that something bad had happened. And she was a very vibrant nurse that had worked in aged care and all sorts of places, and had been at the Alfred, but nobody would have picked at work that she was in a situation of domestic violence. Gayle, Caitlin, Hannah, and of course her beautiful children, and many, many more women and children should be alive today. More than one woman a week is killed from domestic violence in Australia, this we know. Thousands more are alive, and thousands more are living in terror right now. And of course, women in violence and violence is not a women's issue, it's a society's issue, and I'm really pleased to see men here tonight. So moving to the most awkward one for me, some of us do survive. And this was the last time my ex-husband physically abused me, and it was 14 years ago. And I've been thinking about whether I share this, because I've never shared my personal experiences in my professional, well, I don't share it with anyone. But Imogen's so brave and taking on what we need to do in the 21st century, in the third decade, to actually move forward. So I'd actually been separated for several years, for at least 3 years, but I was persistently being stalked and harassed. And I was actually knocked out and came to, and in this particular incident, my youngest son was standing over me and my eldest son was hiding under a table, and it's the images that you don't forget. During my years suffering domestic violence, the police were excellent. Nobody at work knew. But my ex always told me that no matter how good the police were, because I used to say, the police know, he said he would kill me anyway if he wanted to. They couldn't save me or help me. And he threatened many times to punish me, and he would punish me by killing my sons. So for someone like Hannah, when these stories come through, I feel very lucky to be alive, but I know and could only imagine what someone like her and many others go through. So I do know what it is like to live in fear for your life and turn up to work and nurse and provide care every day. And the reason that I'm sharing this is because of the work that you're doing, and because I have the utmost respect for Imogen. And I feel like, as uncomfortable as it is, we need to talk about it. So I don't speak about my personal story, as I said, and I'm not even sure why. I've been reflecting on this. I don't know if I'm just too embarrassed or ashamed still, or I just think I'll keep in the professional space. But I did survive, and I spent the next years then getting my sons and myself safely to adulthood and healing, I guess, what I would call my broken spirit. And so in all that I have done as a single mother for 18 years, then of course you need to work and keep your life together. And I have used my position, and all the awards and things are nice, but what really actually drives me is being able to help other people and empower women, and I'm very focused on that, and you will of course know why. Other people don't, perhaps. So people may not understand my passion and motivation, but it never leaves me, and since my own experiences around my 30s, I have been able to pick the signs in the workplace for other women and help and get a plan, and over a series of weeks and months help them move out. So I often think, even though I would never wish what I went through on anyone, it has helped me, because I masked so well, know what other people are going through. And I guess if we can help somebody else, then it's got to be worth it in a way. Now, in recent months, many health professionals have been working tirelessly to respond to the threat of coronavirus. I'm actually based in Canberra, so I flew down yesterday to be here. And Canberra's, we've had fires and floods, and it's been a really busy start to the year. And then we've been working with the government, of course, for all the retrievals and all the work. And it has been very interesting for me to watch, of course, the coronavirus, like many other viruses that have come before and will come again in terms of infectious diseases, is commanding immediate attention and significant resource. As it should. I'm not questioning or criticising the government's response, but in this society, in terms of that pandemic, I cannot help but wonder when is the same attention and resource going to be invested to rid us of the insidious illness plaguing our community, of the tolerance to violence against women. And imagine if the same resource was put in like it was a disease or something that we could get a vaccination for. And until this is addressed properly, Australia and many other nations will be riddled with shame. We cannot function to our full form while there's people struggling behind closed doors. Violence against nurses and midwives and violence against women or anyone violates our human rights. And now, for the sake of my children, I always do everything for they're 24 and 26 years old now, but the sake of our babies and our future generations, and the reason that I'm tackling patients not grabbing and groping us for the next generation of nurses, we must do everything we can to stop this, including sharing with others that violence against women can and does happen to any one of us. Thank you.